Hello.
Hello,
Hello.
Joshua. How are you?
Hello, Boyan. I am doing very, very well. And hello, everyone on LinkedIn and YouTube tuning in. I am Joshua, product marketing manager here at Hyper. And today I have the awesome privilege of speaking with Boyan, our CEO extraordinaire. Hello.
Thank you, and very kind words. I really appreciate it. Those are much nicer words than you tell me in person.
Well, you know what? I have to put on a face for the public, so this is what we're doing.
I
No,
appreciate it regardless.
I'm really, really excited actually. Um, for those who don't know, Boyan is really, really, really dedicated to teaching and helping cybersecurity professionals in creating strategies and like building foundations for what they might want to do to achieve their security goals in their organization. That is seriously one of the things that drew me to Hyper, and it's one of the things that I've really appreciated about being here and about you as a leader, Boyan. So this is actually really exciting for me to get to help you with these questions about building a security foundation and also just getting to hear more of your insights from speaking to all of these leaders that you get to speak to. So also, if you have any questions and you're watching, drop them in the comment section. We'll be sure to ask Boyan as well. So setting the stage here, a lot happened in 2024. AI is now completely everywhere, but there's other things happening as well. We have seen new threats emerge. We've seen new attacks become more frequent. And so, Boyan, I would love to hear from you. What are you identifying as some of the most significant cybersecurity threats that organizations face and are going to face in 2025?
Yeah, I think there's a few things, right? And just adds a really interesting dynamic to the attack landscape. And
Mhm.
so when I think about kind of the different attack vectors that we now have to consider, well, first of all, actual AI usage amongst the everyday folks um, has climbed significantly over the last year and a half or so. And I feel like the attack vectors are going to also evolve similar to how when everybody started downloading their first browser in the 90s and using web applications for the first time for things like banking and so on. And I think we're going to see a similar situation right now where having confidence in a person's identity is going to be more critical than ever because using AI, it's easier to spoof that identity than ever before. And also, the everyday consumer needs to be able to understand or be able to determine whether or not they are being targeted using one of these more sophisticated attack vectors. One of the security leaders I was talking to recently, said, traditionally our company is based in Japan, and we don't really have to usually worry about social engineering attacks on our service desk because hackers usually speak Chinese or Russian or some other similar language where attacks are very prevalent from, and they don't usually speak Japanese, but now they do all of a sudden, and they speak it very well and
Yep.
incredibly convincingly. And so organizations now have, kind of those fires that they were able to kind of keep low are all of a sudden just very large in their environment, and they have to react quickly. But I think there's also tremendous opportunity on the defense side to use AI to streamline a lot of things. We constantly see this statistic that there's like a million or so, or however many million unfilled cybersecurity jobs in the market, and that is true. But I think many of the cybersecurity jobs out there right now that companies spend lots of money on tend to be very manual in nature. Right, the individuals who work at security operations control centers, they're like staring at screens and looking at logs and responding to alerts. I think AI is going to put us as an industry into a place where we can be much more proactive in responding to the vast majority of these alerts in real time to solve these issues so that our people can focus on more meaningful work ultimately that should resolve in a better set of outcomes for them too.
Yes, exactly. And you touched on a few points there that I think are very important that I want to reiterate. One is in that social engineering example you gave is another way that generative AI can be used in attacks. I think that in the market we see a lot of people focusing on, especially with identity attacks, like deep fakes or or that kind of use of Gen AI. But it's very important to know that like you can use Gen AI in many different ways, and they are using them to make these attacks more successful for them.
Yeah,
Uh,
sometimes I'll talk to a security person and they're just like, well, what are we going to do about deep fakes? What are you guys doing about deep fakes? How are you stopping them? And I asked them, okay, well, like, what's your current like security around, password resets? And they're like, well, last four your social and the date that you started at the company. And I'm like, okay, I don't need a deep fake to bypass that. Right? I
exactly.
can just ask an AI to go through LinkedIn and
Hmm.
the previous data breaches and find all the combinations of date that started in the last four socials for all your employees and target it that way. And that doesn't
Hmm.
require a deep fake. So I feel like sometimes, there's a bit of an overcorrection to pay too much attention to what's on the cover of the Wall Street Journal because it
Yeah,
happens in isolated incidents, whereas the real risk is, around much simpler attack methods.
exactly, exactly. I think that's so important. So moving on to our next question we have for you. Can you share some effective strategies for integrating security practices into an organization's core values and daily operations? And I think this is important because, again, it is, how do we really transform that organizational mindset to embed some of these security strategies?
Yeah, one of the things that like really tends to boggle my mind at times is the amount of times we've seen in the last few years where a cybersecurity company who has been implemented by a Fortune 500 company gets breached, and the ramifications of that and the downstream effects of that. I mean, the big example of this was a few years ago with SolarWinds, right? And like
Right.
them using SolarWinds 123 as a password, right? And we see similar things to like I think it was Beyond Trust recently where they had like a hard coded API key or something that was utilized, and so it's just so critical that organizations hold their vendors accountable to the cybersecurity posture that they have. And for vendors, especially in the cybersecurity industry, like you have to practice what you preach. I mean, you can't sit here and sell a security solution and not have your house in order. And so what I recommend is for any cybersecurity company, even if you're venture capital funded and you have to take into consideration all of these things with regards to moving fast and bringing your product to market, you can't let security be an afterthought. And the earlier you build it into your operating rhythm as an organization, the better.
Hmm.
And the other thing I've seen is a lot of technology providers in the cybersecurity space. They have chief security officers, but in the vast majority of instances, it tends to be a sales role, which is really weird to me. And so there's a lot of field chief security officers whose job is essentially to go out and meet with customers and hear their perspectives and opinions, which is super important. But you
Hmm.
also have to have that internal focus on cybersecurity
Hmm.
and making sure that, for example, we've seen instances last year where some of these cybersecurity vendors like use single factor authentication for access to their Fortune 500 customers' environments. I mean, why would you do that? That is not acceptable. It should not be acceptable.
Yeah.
And so I think as third party risk management becomes a bigger and bigger concern for organization, um, companies will have to adjust in real time. And
Hmm.
the thing is, like in the cybersecurity space, we're always preaching about how you can't think about security in a reactionary way. And
100%.
we see cybersecurity companies do it all the time,
Yeah, I
which
know.
is interesting.
So to kind of like drill into that, trying to give the audience like some actionable maybe things to do there, are you, saying that we should really get the security teams or CISO or someone involved in the product build process to make sure they're kind of building secure by design, or what are some other kind of ways we can get that process not be so reactionary?
Yeah, I mean, for us at Hyper, it starts even at the product definition phase, right? So,
Mm,
um, whenever we build anything, we have a product definition document that's created for it, and cybersecurity considerations are part of that template, right? So before we build anything, before we ever even start, before ever even it makes its way into our roadmap, the security team is brought in and weighs in when it comes to the security considerations that we have to take into place. And then that ultimately also helps us inform the level of effort a particular capability will need. It also helps us make sure that like we're thinking ahead of our customers when it comes to these solutions. I think also um, regularly doing penetration testing from third
mm,
parties on your product is just absolutely critical. And finding different providers to do those different tests on different parts of your product is really important because you want to have a diversity of expertise targeting your product.
mm.
And one of the things that's been super helpful to us is having a bug bounty program. So through a platform like BugCrowd or otherwise, um, being able to open the door to independent penetration testers to try to hack into your environment, and having the forum to do that is extremely beneficial.
Of course, of course. I love that. Those are some great actionable steps we can do. Um, uh, Another kind of point on this is so we we know we need to incorporate type of security first thinking throughout our entire organization. Um, we may have some challenges when it comes to getting that across to the entire organization. Do you have any insights of what some of those common challenges are that you can highlight, and maybe how some security teams and professionals can get around those challenges and overcome them?
Yeah, look, I think security cannot be isolated within any organization, whether you're a 50-person company or a 50,000-person company. The ability to make friends and influence others is critical for security practitioners, right? And if you want to get a security best practice across an entire organization, first of all, you have to be able to measure it. Like if you can't measure it, you can't track it, which means you can't enforce it. And then two, you have to be able to influence other parts of the organization in order to drive that change. And it is much easier said than done, especially within larger organizations where in the enterprise, where like the average chief security officer tenure is like under 2 years. That's extremely difficult to do. So being able to build those partnerships internally very, very quickly, and trying to find areas where security can be a business enabler is super critical. Because if you're able to do that, then if you're able to deliver that line of business a significant value by deploying a
Mhm,
security control, then next five security controls will be welcome much, much more than they might otherwise. So this is really where like understanding the motivations and the problem sets of the people that your controls will impact cannot be understated.
mhm,
And so I think, and then being able to back that up with measurable outcomes
mhm.
is how you actually get the ball rolling.
Yeah, I mean, that's great advice. Like making sure you have those like business goals and objectives outlined to everyone who cares about those things, and you're able to measure it, you're able to show that success in like what you're able to do by implementing these controls. That's incredible. One kind of question on that is, with a lot of security strategies or tools or implementations, there can be a lot of change management. So even if you're making that business case for doing this project, how can a security team or professional kind of alleviate the fears of other executives or other stakeholders that the change management is not going to be insurmountable?
Yeah, look, historically, CISOs, like, basically the only time that they will do change management is when they can have a bludgeon to drive it with, and that
Exactly.
bludgeon 9 times out of 10 is regulation, right? And so, and I don't think that's the best way to approach it, right? This basically creates an environment within an organization where every time the CISO walks into the room, everybody's like, oh damn, like, what regulation are we going to have to comply with now, and how much pain is this going to cause for my organization?
Hmm.
I think whenever you have any project that requires change management, and most identity projects do require change management, I think you have to be extremely articulate in the way that you're describing the value. And then two is you have to find fun ways to get users to adopt the technology. And this can be through gamification, simple reward systems. Like, you'd be shocked what a Fortune 500 C-level executive is willing to do, for to get an iPad if they deploy this technology to their users the fastest out of everybody else. And it's also a little bit of bragging rights. And
Of course.
I think in
That's
many
worth more than the
corporate
iPad.
environments, there's always some competition that's friendly, and be able to take advantage of that is super helpful.
Awesome. Cool. Thank you. So now let's say we're on the flip side. The security team has come, they've made their case, and I'm the CMO or I am the CEO or something, and I'm so bought in on this. How can I and my department better support the security team or the CISO in their initiatives?
Um, I think being able to communicate that to your team, that this is important in their words, right? So if you're a CMO or a head of sales or head of engineering, whenever there is any project that requires change management, the messaging will be different, right? The value will be different, right? And so, for example, what we've seen in passwordless deployments is the message to engineering is like, hey, you hate logging into that thing 20 times a day. Well, now we're just going to have to log into it once, and it's going to be so much better. And
Mhm.
you'll be able to, be this much more effective in either helping customers with their issues, or resolving bugs, or you won't have to break out of your flow to continuously re-authenticate to stuff that is hindering your ability to work. On the marketing side, it could be very similar, right? Where somebody is, especially if their job involves a lot of travel and accessing different systems through on VPN, off VPN, so on and so forth, with a credential can be extremely daunting. So
Mhm.
being able to find messaging that fits that specific department and having the leader of that department articulate that value, I think, is critical.
Mhm.
And this is where, like, really the security organization being able to truly understand and empathize with those different members of the business, it can help them create that messaging, and ultimately, reduce months off of a change management process.
Yes. And not saying that we would necessarily endorse or advocate for this, but do you see this happen, or would you find value in kind of, maybe making some of their initial process harder or more difficult so they're more likely to switch to the easier method, like in a passwordless case, for instance?
Yeah, I mean, we've seen companies say, "Oh, okay, you want to keep using a password? Well, now you have to use an 18-character password, and you have to change it every 2 months, right?" Or you can have this other thing that's much easier and much more streamlined.
Yeah.
So giving users that optionality, I think, is super important, especially when you have that kind of last group of laggards,
Yes.
in any environment, which every company has them. Like, every company, for some reason, has some percentage of people who are just completely averse to any change, whether it's positive or negative.
Mhm. All right. So you heard it here first, folks. Create the problem, sell the solution to your departments. All right. So moving, this is all great. Moving on to more of like a future outlook.
Yep.
This can be you looking into your crystal ball. This can be you just kind of your dreams. I don't know. I don't know what this is, but I'm curious to know for specifically 2025, maybe 2026, what are some emerging technologies or trends that you believe will have the most significant impact on cybersecurity? in the
Yeah,
next few
I think
years?
I think this confluence between machine identities and human identities will happen much faster than we think,
Hmm.
right? So when I think about the humans that I interact with on a regular basis, I obviously interact with people I work with. But I also interact with customer service people and other technologies that I use. Um, and I think in 5 years, a lot of those will be replaced with artificial intelligence agents. Um, Now, me as a user being able to discern between who's a trusted agent and who's a not trusted agent, when there's literally billions or trillions of them, I think is going to be extremely important. So, this concept of an identity being created and assigned to an individual, whether they're a human or not, is going to be important. And then the reputation of that credential that's issued to that individual will be critical. Um, and I think just the pace at which these agents will be developed, um, we can't pause all the time throughout our day to sit here and reevaluate the trust of an agent. I think a lot of that is
Hmm.
going to need to be built in, kind of like in the 2000s, like when we had first got to like the green check mark right in our browsers. I think we're going to need something like that, especially for all the agents that we're interacting with on a day-to-day basis. So I think
Interesting.
that's really exciting.
Yeah, yeah, that's interesting. I haven't really thought about that yet. That is now scary to me, but that's okay. Are there any other emerging trends even? Like that's like technology based, but is there like a trend or something that you're interested in watching?
Yeah, I think we're going to be in more of a global type of work setting more
Yeah.
than ever, right? Like, and this is also kind of being driven by AI, right? Where for us here in the United States, like right now, we mostly work with companies and people with countries and people in those countries who speak English well, and that is a
Mhm.
big time limiting factor. Um, well, there's a lot of places in the world where people don't speak English, but they have brilliant talent that we would want to be working with. And so that language barrier being eliminated by I think is going to put us in a position where we're a much more global workforce than we are today. So I think that's a trend. And then all the security implications associated with that, right?
Yeah.
Where do those locations have the infrastructure and the practices in place to facilitate these work relationships is going to be super critical.
Awesome. All right. Last question for you. All of this new technology is coming out, it's coming out so fast, so fast. How do you think organizations can stay ahead of the curve when it comes to these technologies?
I think using the technologies themselves to stay ahead of the curve is obviously better, but I think organizations will have to start thinking about from a security perspective the controls that they can implement that gives them much more deterministic knowledge,
Mm.
right? So I'll give you an example. Like when everybody was in an office 5 days a week, all day long, we didn't worry about North Korean hackers like being a remote employee in our business, right? Because that wouldn't have been possible, right? And so, but that is an issue now because of the technology landscape and the evolving environment that we're in. So I think finding ways to be much more binary in certain areas of trust that we impose on people that we interact with and work with is going to be like a major requirement. Otherwise, we just won't be able to keep up, right?
Yeah.
Like you can't have a identity team or a security team of hundreds of people to just monitor these situations. It has to be a very, you know, green light, red light, binary type of outcome when it comes to identity controls. And I think this is what, FIDO-based authentication and phishing
Mhm.
resistance and identity assurance levels that are increased will provide. But organizations will have to move into the direction sooner than later if they want to avoid some of these
Yeah,
serious
definitely.
consequences of these attacks.
Definitely, yeah. We're seeing them happen so fast, and evolving rapidly. So definitely. All right. I'm getting the red light that I'm supposed to be wrapping it up. Thank you so much, Boyan, for letting me grill you. I mean, it's not every day you get to just grill your CEO about all the questions you've wanted to know. It's been great to like get more insights. I can't wait to get more. I could literally just ask you questions all day long.
You're
Um,
sitting right over there, so you can do that.
I will. I will just walk over and start asking you questions then. All right.
Thank
Thank
you,
you so much,
Joshua.
everyone, for watching. And thank you, Boyan. And we will see you all in the next one. Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.